Welcome to the Church Resource, where we talk about the best resources for pastors, leaders, and lay people. I'm your host, Jeff Oliver, looking today at a library book I picked up. By the way, if you have anyone saying, pastor, teacher, whatever, you have to read this book, maybe check it out at the library first, maybe check it on audiobooks and see if it's something that you want on your shelf at all. But this is what I did to take a look at this book. I was looking for novels based on the life of King David in the Bible. So I went and found this book, and this is, I'll tell you what I think about it. But it is written by Geraldine Brooks. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and so highly acclaimed author, very well appreciated in the writing community. And so she has written also the book called People of the Book, also about the Jews and following their journey. This book is called The Secret Chord, and as I said, it is a book based on the life of David. And Geraldine Brooks, from what research I've done, she's raised Jewish and is very much part of that faith. I would say that she's a secular Jew, meaning only that maybe not observant in Judaism, but very much steeped in the history and the stories of her Judaism. So I do appreciate so much that she has written this book and has looked into the background of the story of David and found a great way to put together this novel that's an easy read. It is fun to read, I believe, and it's something that I've found just entertaining. And but it has had me, as now an evangelical, maybe looking on from the other side of the cross, that there are some things in there that a Jewish writer would maybe not even be expected to note, to point out in their writing on the story of David, and that any of that story would have any kind of messianic tinge to it, or any kind of hint that we're looking forward to a redeemer that is very much in that line of David, certainly, but even David as a type, as we often see as in preaching and teaching, and even in other novels. I mentioned another novel in a previous podcast that was, I think, very close to the biblical text, but also written by a Christian pastor and author. And so this is pretty different. Again, very entertaining. But what I found is that if there were places, and there are in this book, that maybe gave something questionable to me, that made me raise an eyebrow a little bit, and I read with discernment antenna very high, and I want to make sure that what is being said is true, and to read that with a keen awareness that you are not reading a definite, a perfect account of what the Bible says, but there's got to be some embellishment. There's got to be some artistic license that's given here. One example is that Geraldine Brooks points out in just talking about this story of David, that there is a kind of a questionable lineage that David has, that he is definitely the son of Jesse, but maybe not the son of the mother that all of his other brothers came from, and so. There was that was a big question for me. I thought, well, there's never been any question in my mind. It never came up on a Sunday school flannel board, so I don't understand, or even in deeper research than flannel board. But it never came up before that there was some question as to where David came from and who his mother was. But as I looked, there is another resource that I'll talk about at another time in a different podcast that is looking at rabbinical sources. So as rabbis over the millennia have looked at these stories, there have been, even from the very beginning, as the story of King David, as it got bigger and bigger. Of course, he's a giant hero, and whether you're looking at Jewish history, you're looking at Christian history, he is just massive in the story, and he is a hero in every sense of the word, and but a flawed hero, and so that even makes him sometimes even more heroic. But of course, stories are going to be added to. Stories are going to be embellished as you look at somebody and you hear about their life. Then he becomes larger than life. He becomes this epic figure that no one can even try to emulate. And so where those stories come from, though, and where those maybe explanations for things that might be questions in the Old Testament, or call it the Hebrew Bible if you like, that questions that might come up. Rabbis have debated these things again over centuries and millennia about what the answers to these things would be, and you have some very wise rabbis and teachers talking about what the answers to these questions are, and where they would find the answers to those, and what their strongest beliefs are on who these people are. So there's that story, as I looked up in that particular book, about David, and where that story came from, that his mother might not actually be his mother. Now, as it turns out, the way they explain it, she was the mother presented in the Bible as David's mother, was actually his mother. But there was a reason for the questioning there, and they explained that in that rabbi teaching book that we'll, again, cover in another podcast. But just thought you might be aware of that these things that are woven within the story, in the fabric of this story of David, that does highlight, and you'll recognize, if you're familiar with the story of David, the account of David in the Bible, you'll see those familiar stories in there, even familiar names and scenarios that David found himself in. But also there are some things in there that seem to be from outside the text. Well, that's because rabbis have debated these things for so long, and they've just become a part of the folklore, part of the culture, and the understanding of these stories. So I appreciate that from just that perspective, and the historical side of things, that to understand where these ideas come from, and what the kind of the mythology sometimes around certain biblical characters, in this case David, would come from. So I want to recommend cautiously this book. Read it with your antenna up, and just try to find where some of these questions, if you have some things that come up in your reading of it, if you decide to read this, really just for pleasure reading, this is not a Bible study, but if you wanted to do that and find out where those other things came from, I think that is a worthy pursuit for you to do that, just kind of an intellectual exercise. A great read otherwise, and it will give you a good look at the story of David. I want to tell you that one caution that I have is that, as many people have had over the years, as they examine the relationship between David and Jonathan, there is a little bit of a question as to how close their relationship was. I'll just leave it right there, but it's only hinted at and not overt. So I'll just tell you that as a caution, and you interpret it how you will. So this is, again, from Geraldine Brooks. The book is called A Secret Chord, a novel. It is a story about the life of David, and again, cautiously recommending it for you as a good pleasure reading. Well, it's one book on my shelf. Actually, it's from the library shelf that has been helpful to me, and I hope it gives you a bit of direction as you prayerfully consider which resources will best help you and the people you minister to. Well, thanks for listening to The Church Resource. And please make sure you give us a review. And if you have any suggestions of resources you would like us to look at, email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com.